Welcome to the Blue 52 show. My name is Jacob Blue, and today I wanted to give a way too early 2024 NFL award predictions. Doing MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, and Comeback Player of the Year. That's where I'm going to stop it. I'm not going to try to predict too much. This was kind of just another way for me to get out my opinions on some of the teams that I'm looking forward to this season and some of the players I think are really going to shine. Don't take this way too seriously and think that I'm locking in that these players are guaranteed to get the awards that I'm saying they will. Anyone could get injured. Anyone could have a bad season or whatever. Just having some fun, and honestly, after the draft, I wanted to talk about some of the rookies that I think are going to do exceptionally well this season, and I'm actually pretty confident in at least one of my takes for the rookies, but let's just hop right into it. I think the best place to start from is from MVP, so let's get into my pick and prediction for who I think is going to get MVP in 2024, or it'll be 2025 by the time I think they get the award. Not quite, but it'll almost be 2025. MVP, I'm going to say CJ Stroud. Listen, this is a total... It could really bite me in the ass saying that CJ Stroud is going to be the MVP when you have guys like Mahomes and Lamar and Josh Allen in the league still playing at a high level. But after his campaign last season, getting Offensive Rookie of the Year, and then seeing, did fine in the playoffs, got beat by the Ravens. Most people expected that, but CJ Stroud, through the offseason, has acquired Stephon Diggs, buffed up the offensive line just a little bit. Nico Collins is back. Tank Dell is back. The coaching and everything is still there. This is a tough conference to be in the AFC. You do still have to go, if you are going to win MVP, you are still going to have to beat Lamar at some point. You are going to have to beat the Chiefs at some point, which is a tough ask, but I honestly think the Texans are going to have a pretty electric year and make a really deep run into the playoffs, and that's what I mean a little bit by saying that some of this is more about how I see the team doing and just kind of being like, okay, who usually wins MVP? It's usually a quarterback. And I think that the Texans are going to be really dang awesome, and CJ Stroud is going to be the head of that again. I imagine him having an awesome season with Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, Tank Dell, anyone else they want to throw into that. I think he's going to light it up this season. So, he's going to be really young. I think he'll be about 23 years old at the time that these awards are given out. So that is really young. But keep in mind, Lamar won his at 22 years old. So he won't be the youngest player of all time to win an MVP. Actually, I think if we are looking at Lamar's MVP, he won that his second full season in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. And this will also be CJ Stroud's second full season. So I don't think it's that ridiculous to say that it could happen. Will it? I don't know. But I believe in Stroud. I think the game plans they're going to go into are going to be really developed. They're going to take an even bigger step because he's such a smart quarterback, and they're going to give him even more to work with, not just with the players that I was mentioning, but also the play calling. It was kind of around that Buccaneers game last season that we saw the Texans just be like, you know what, CJ, just go play ball. We are done with a short leash. We're done treating you like a rookie that doesn't know what they're doing. We're just going to let you go play ball. And if you remember that game against the Buccaneers, that was a really, really special game from CJ Stroud. Came back and won that with not much time left on the clock. CJ Stroud is my MVP pick for 2024. Now on to Offensive Player of the Year. I'm going to give it to Jamar Chase. We see receivers pretty often getting Offensive Player of the Year. Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it was Christian McCaffrey this last season. It's always a receiver running back in this debate too. And, last season the Bengals were pretty disappointing. Joe Burrow goes down. The season kind of gets lost a little bit. I think Jamar Chase is due for, I wouldn't say a breakout because he came in as a rookie and dominated. And this last season, he still had 1,200 yards. He was still producing. Now, without Joe Burrow, he wasn't able to produce to the absolute maximum amount that he could. But as long as we see Joe Burrow staying healthy, and I think the chances of that are going to be even better because you bring in Trent Brown and you draft Amarius Mims, who I don't see starting much this year, but I do see him as a rotational offensive lineman, whether that's guard or tackle, I think the protection for him is going to be a lot better. They still have Jamar Chase, and they have T. Higgins. At this point in time, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with T. Higgins, but, they also, through the draft, the Bengals toss in a guy like Jermaine Burton, who has some off-the-field concerns for sure, but as a player, I would have no problem just talking about Jermaine Burton as a prospect, saying that he would be like a top 60, top 70 player in this class, and they got him at good value. I like the locker room, I like the culture in the Bengals, and I think they're going to handle that. So Joe Burrow, and I'll talk about him more later, he's got a lot of weapons to throw to, but Jamar Chase is the number one obvious one, for sure. I think he's going to have a lot of yards this season. We're going to see the Bengals back in competition for, heavy front runners in the playoffs, and Jamar Chase is going to be that guy, in my opinion. Talk about Jamar Chase a lot as soon as he entered the league. We were already talking about him being a top 10 player. He's kind of solidified himself. Sorry, a top 10 receiver, not overall player necessarily, but he definitely has solidified himself as a top 10 receiver. And I think after this season, if we keep Joe Burrow healthy, and again, the AFC is a tough spot. It's tough competition, especially in their division, playing with the Steelers and the Ravens and the Browns. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals still come out on top of that this season. I'm very hopeful for this season for them, and I think Jamar Chase will make a pretty solid case to be Offensive Player of the Year as long as everyone stays healthy. On to Defensive Player of the Year. This one I'm excited for, and this one's kind of indicative of how I feel about the team. Defensive Player of the Year is Max Crosby. This is a guy we've talked about the last 3 or 4 years as being like, okay, I know we have Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. I don't care about how you want to order them or whatever, but we have those guys that are kind of the front runners for best defensive edges in football. And I think it's been tough deciding, like, where does Max Crosby fit into that? Is he one of those guys that should be in that kind of big three, but isn't just because the team is so lackluster? Or is he in that second tier below? I think this season, with Antonio Pierce as the head coach, I think the Raiders are going to have a really surprising year. I was tempted to find a way to stick Gardner Minshew into this somewhere, but I just couldn't. I don't think he fits in a comeback player of the year or anything. But yeah, I believe in him to do a fine job this season. I really love what Antonio Pierce is doing for the Raiders and just, again, establishing that culture. It reminds me a little bit of the Lions with Dan Campbell. That's kind of how I feel their season could go. Okay, I definitely don't see the Raiders going into the playoffs and making a big run this season just like the Lions did, but I see them on a similar trajectory, and I think we could be talking in like 2 or 3 years like, yeah, the Raiders are back in this. So a lot of unanswered questions. How is Antonio Pierce going to do in his second year as a full-time head coach? How is Gardner Minshew going to do as a starting quarterback? Does this team have enough protection up front? I really like Colton Miller, but other than that, the offensive line is pretty lackluster. They add in a weapon like Brock Bowers. I'll talk about him in a second. There's a lot of weapons on this team, honestly, and I think they needed a guy like Gardner Minshew who could just dole it out to him. So I don't project that Gardner Minshew is going to have an MVP caliber season or anything, but I think he's going to surprise some people for sure, and also kind of prove like, hey, you didn't need to draft a quarterback this year. Like, maybe it would have been nice if the Raiders could have drafted a quarterback early to sit or something, but I think Gardner Minshew is going to show like, no, I can start on a team for a year or two and do really well for them. And he did that this year with the Colts. They almost went to the playoffs. Back to what I was saying about my pick for Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah, I'm going to give it to Max Crosby. I think he's going to continue being a phenomenal pass rusher. I honestly think he'll probably break his own personal record for sacks this season. Malcolm Kuntz, one of the other defensive ends, is helping on that defensive line. Tyree Wilson, someone they drafted last season, hopefully will make some steps up to being even better. And then you toss Christian Wilkins into this mix. Now it's really tough to double team Max Crosby and focus all your attention to him because you've got 3 other guys you're going to have to look to get some pads on them. So I think Max Crosby, that addition of Christian Wilkins was huge for him. I think Max Crosby is just going to benefit even more from adding more weapons to the defensive line. So Max Crosby is going to be my pick for Defensive Player of the Year. Now moving on to the rookies, we'll start with Offensive Rookie. This one's a little bit like, I'll toss out a couple names here. I'll lock one in for sure. First of all, Caleb Williams. He'll probably win it. That didn't really seem very fun to say Caleb Williams because I think most people, it'll probably end up going to him. We don't know how the season's going to go at all. Like I said, he could get hurt. He could stink the place up. I don't know. Other players on the team can get hurt and could have a negative effect on his season. But Caleb Williams is a pretty obvious one. You look at that roster. Offensive line isn't perfect, but I don't think their offensive line is absolute trash. I don't think it's going to be Caleb Williams running for his life every single play. Then you go over to the weapons, and you have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze, who I think is ready to play like right now, but he won't even have to. So yeah, looking at the weapons he's working with, how good of a player he is, if everything goes right, he'll probably be the Offensive Rookie of the Year. I want to move on from that, though, because, like I said, I don't think it's super fun to say that. So I'll just toss out another name. I was just talking up the Raiders. I think Brock Bowers has every chance to get Offensive Rookie of the Year this season. After he was drafted to the Raiders, a lot of people had questions, and I talked about this in my draft grades video, but I don't think that you're taking any time away from Michael Mayer being on the field or getting reps by adding Brock Bowers into this room. Brock Bowers can get used all over the field. And then you look at the other weapons that the Raiders have with like Devontae Adams. That's someone you want to play in the slot and on the outside. You don't want to just stick him at one position. So wherever you move Brock Bowers, if you want to stick him in the slot, now you just need to kick Devontae Adams outside. If you want to play him, you probably won't play him in line too much, but if you do, you can still go to 12 personnel and have Michael Mayer on the other side or stacked up on the same, whatever. If you stick him at fullback or H-back or anything like that, you're not taking any reps from any of the running backs or other fullbacks that you necessarily care about. Just other ways to get him in space. I think Brock Bowers is a really versatile playmaker. I also think that Gardner Minshew is going to really like throwing the ball to him. He's going to be a big fan of having someone he can just dump the ball like that off to, and he picks up 20 extra yards in rack yards. He's going to be a machine in the rack game. I think especially his first year, I don't know if teams are going to know how to handle him just yet. Looking at the division that he's in, it's definitely a tough division. I know I'm talking up the Raiders while they are in a somewhat tough division, but man, Brock Bowers is going to tear it up this season, and yeah, that's going to be my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year, kind of alongside Caleb Williams. That's the more like guaranteed, more possible one, but Brock Bowers is the other one that came to mind. The only other offensive rookie I did want to point out, and I don't think he'll get Offensive Rookie of the Year. I can't think of a single time an offensive lineman got Offensive Rookie of the Year, but I'm also going to toss out Troy Fautanu. If offensive lineman could, I think he'll get it. This is someone I saw as a top 12 player. He goes to the Steelers at 20, and then the Steelers go ahead and take two other offensive linemen to really boost up the ability that the offensive line has to protect in the pass and the run game. Troy Fautanu, even if he plays tackle, if he plays guard, if he plays center, wherever, I think he's going to make a huge impact for the Steelers. I don't see him as getting it, but I did want to mention that. And like I said, if offensive linemen could like realistically win Offensive Rookie of the Year, I definitely think it could go to Troy Fautanu. I love the system that they're moving to and playing in also. I didn't love Arthur Smith as a head coach on the Falcons, but you make Arthur Smith an offensive coordinator and you have guys like Justin Fields and Russell Wilson for him to work with at quarterback. I think that's good enough. And we know he loves working with athletic quarterbacks and playmakers. Troy Fautanu is someone you can easily move in the run game with quarterbacks, design run game. He's also phenomenal in terms of pass protection. So yeah, I think Troy Fautanu, in terms of offensive lineman, was one of the most pro-ready in this draft class, and I think he's going to impress. Unfortunately, he's not going to get it, but another name I wanted to toss out. Moving on next to Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't want to be too split, but this one was tough. I'll be concise with this one and say that I do have a one, someone I will lock in as my vote for Defensive Rookie of the Year prediction. That's going to be Byron Murphy with the Seattle Seahawks. Byron Murphy is an electric defensive tackle. I wasn't sure where exactly he was going to go in the draft. It looks like, a lot of defensive players fell, so he ended up falling a little bit, but I don't think he regrets that at all. He's going to get to talk to Mike Macdonald about this scheme and his role. I see him, especially when you look at the roster that the Seahawks have for interior defensive linemen, I think he's plug and play. He's ready to go right now. He's one of the players I thought could definitely step in, even as defensive tackle being a position that usually requires a lot of years of development, and he'll need that for sure. But looking at last year with Jalen Carter and how he was able to produce so early, I think Byron Murphy could do something similar. And again, I'll bring Mike Macdonald back into this conversation. What a phenomenal defensive mind in terms of developing a scheme to get guys open and free pass rushes. And that doesn't just go to getting a safety, a wide open blitz off the edge. That's also getting guys like Byron Murphy, who are pretty big and strong, but really good athletes that move well in space and in between the tackles. Looking at all the stunts and all the funky stuff that the Ravens did this last season, especially to get Justin Madubuike all of those sacks and all that production, I see a very similar role with him and Byron Murphy, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if he has, about 8 sacks this season, which for a defensive rookie, that'll get it done for sure. He's not going to have a limited role. He doesn't have anyone breathing down his neck or anything. I think he's going to come in, start, open up the defense, and they're going to find a perfect way to get him designed pressure, and they're going to definitely be able to find a way to tell Byron Murphy, hey, we're just sending 4 straight up, go get after the quarterback. He definitely has the ability to do that. You also look at the run game, and that's not something people are going to pay too much attention to when looking at Defensive Rookie of the Year, or any of these awards. They like stuff they can point to, like the stats, like most sacks. But I think Byron Murphy is a phenomenal run support player as well. He's going to stuff up that middle pretty consistently. The Seahawks definitely could use a lot of help with their defense against the run, and Byron Murphy is going to be awesome in that. So, Defensive Rookie of the Year pick is going to go to Byron Murphy. And my last pick, Comeback Player of the Year, I'm going to give it to Joe Burrow. He misses most of last season with another injury. At this point, I do have some concerns about Joe Burrow's injury history and how many times he has gotten injured, but you can't bet on someone getting injured, and I'm gonna bet that he doesn't. And I said my offensive player of the year was Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow, if Jamar Chase is offensive player of the year, comeback player of the year definitely is probably going to go to Joe Burrow in that event. I know he's had his injury problems since he's gotten in the league. He's also been one of the best quarterbacks in the league since he entered it. So those are the kind of things we can't forget about. Joe Burrow is a phenomenal quarterback, and I think the Bengals are going to be back this season. That's kind of, like I was saying earlier, this is kind of being predictive on how teams will do. I predict that the Raiders are going to surprise and do really well. I'm also going to predict that the Bengals are going to do really well. Not that that's much of a surprise. It's just more about getting health back on the team. They still have a lot of their playmakers. If T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson, if T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson end up not being on the Bengals by the start of the season, I'm really going to show my ass in that case then, because I think things are not going to be nearly as good as I'm predicting. But at this point in time right now, they are both on the team, and I have a lot of high hopes. Joe Burrow coming off that injury, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins still there. Again, I mentioned all this with how wonderful I think the offense and everything is going to be. So yeah, Joe Burrow is my pick for Comeback Player of the Year. Just to recap, MVP, we went with CJ Stroud. Offensive Player of the Year, Jamar Chase. Defensive Player of the Year, Max Crosby. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Brock Bowers, Troy Fautanu, Caleb Williams. Brock Bowers is the one I'm probably going to show a graphic of. Defensive Rookie of the Year, we're going to go Byron Murphy. And then Comeback Player of the Year is going to go to Joe Burrow. This one was a little bit quick, but if you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe, maybe leave a comment. No, that's too much. Unless you want to, real bad. I'm not going to say anything if you want to leave a comment or whatever. That is going to wrap this up. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day. So excited for this next season. Let me know what you guys think down below. Bye.